I feel very changed as a person since my son Eli suffered a serious brain injury in a car crash in May 2004. Although the changes can sometimes be clear to define, others are more obscure. On the night of Eli's crash, the doctors at the hospital told us he had sustained severe head injuries. And apart from knowing that his life was under threat, we really didn't know what the implications were for him. When we first saw Eli in the intensive care, he was on life support. And while the sight of my son on life support was overwhelming, he looked at that stage so normal, it was really hard to comprehend what was ahead of us. I feel that I truly understand heartbreak, pure heartbreak, and I feel that a light went out within me that night. As Eli has learned to teach his brain to live around the damage it sustained, I've learned to live around overwhelming grief. Eli, being on life support, was perfectly still, and about 4 or 5 days after the crash, I went into the ward to see him, and I'd noticed that his hands had started to curl up in a contracture, and it was probably when I moved from shock to grief, because it was the first physical indication of his acquired brain injury and the subsequent spasticity that would affect the mobility for the rest of his life. It was like a bolt out of the blue, because suddenly everything that I was being told became more of a reality. I had always considered myself very, very strong and very capable. So I was pretty surprised at just how lacking in control I felt, total powerlessness, and it made me see a whole nother me. As they were slowly bringing Eli out of the coma, which took a few days for him to wake up, he certainly couldn't talk, and that was obvious to us straight away. And he really had no mobility. He couldn't move his legs or his arms or lift his head up in any way. If the nurses propped him up a little bit in bed just to get him off from being always flat on his back, if he slipped to one side, he couldn't straighten himself up. He really had to wait until someone could prop him up. Eli can walk, which was a wonderful achievement, but he falls easily. Getting back up onto his feet is quite difficult, and sometimes pretty impossible without something to hang on to. An acquired brain injury creates real fatigue. For most of us, for our bodies to function, it requires about 20% of our brain. With Eli, because of the damage in his brain requires about 65% of his brain power to help him function, which doesn't leave an awful lot for everything else for him, and that creates real fatigue. At the time of Eli's crash, I felt devoid of strength, both physical and emotional, and sometimes still feel that way. Eli's survival allowed us the opportunity to talk with him about what happened and what led up to the events of the night, what's happened since, how everybody feels, how it's affected people. To actually not be able to have those conversations and have some of those gaps filled in would just be awful. Eli's situation has really helped me to appreciate life and the simple things in life. if I decide to hop into the car and just go to the local supermarket, I have running through my head, wow, how lucky am I just to be able to make a quick decision, hop into the car and go and do that. It's not that simple for Eli. It takes him much longer to get to the car, probably 3 times what it takes me. Walking around a supermarket's really difficult. Standing in a queue can almost be impossible for him. And that's just one small example of the things that make you appreciate life so much more. Eli had always worked and would dearly love to work again, and has worked really hard against the odds to achieve what he'll need to put himself in the workforce again. I always thought I had a good and open approach towards people's disabilities, but I now know I came very short of the mark. It's not a world I wanted to become part of, just like everyone else in it, but my perspective is so different now. How would I want someone to behave towards my son? The support network, both formal and informal, surrounding Eli to help him achieve the best possible outcome from a horrible situation is enormous and not always obvious. Family and friends have all played a role and have had to adjust to becoming an ever-aware group. While in many ways Eli can mask his difficulties, he can achieve this with his own attitude, supported by a huge circle of people who can help control his environment and support him in his pathway. As a parent, like all parents, I always hoped that my son would have wonderful success. He has, by never giving up during the past 5 difficult years and making progress against incredible odds. I'm really proud of what he's done, but I guess sometimes the victory is bittersweet.